Hello folks, welcome to Edupedia World. I am Abhinay Gupta. So today again we'll continue with the topic, the compromises, arrangements and amalgamations of companies. And remember my dear friends, as I've always said, and this is an important thing to remember, that the provisions for these chapter will be contained in the Companies Act 1956. We have not yet got these amended for your May 2016 examinations at least. Right? Next will be updated. Whenever it's updated, it will be informed to you people in the coming lectures. So in the previous lectures, what we have seen is we dealt with section 391 to 393, which talked about the procedure for compromise or arrangement. Right? We understood what compromises are, what arrangements are, and what amalgamation is. And what are the procedure that one has to follow, either the company, creditor, member, or liquidator. Right? We had talked about the application to the court. The court will consider the scheme, whether it's bona fide. It will take the representation of CG. Company will give a notice to the members and the creditors about the terms, effects, the interest and everything. The scheme needs to be approved by at least 50% of the shareholders in number and 75% by the value of the shares. Right? We had seen what are the conditions that the court will have to check to consider whether or not the scheme is bona fide, and then it sanctions the scheme, and it is effective and applicable only when it is filed with the ROC. Right? So this is what we have seen in the previous lectures, to be very brief with. Right? So today we move ahead to the new topic, that is section 392, powers of the court. Over here in this section we actually summarize the powers of the court. So basically the powers of the court are dealt with section 391 and 392. So this is where we summarize all the powers, which starts with the power to give direction to the company. Yes, the court will give the direction. Now what are the nature of directions that it will give? We have seen in the previous lectures that the court will ask the company to call the meeting, hold a meeting and conduct the meeting. And the manner for doing so will be directed by the court. And these directions will override the Companies Act, the provisions of the Companies Act. So here the court is being said to be the supreme power, right? And we have also seen that the court will issue such direction only when it is satisfied that the scheme is reasonable and workable. When it thinks that yes, the scheme that the creditors or the company or the liquidator has proposed is workable and is bona fide. So it will move ahead with the next step, that is issuing directions to conduct and hold the meeting. Next, the court also has the power to stay any suit and any proceeding. Right? It can stay the continuance or commencement of any suit or any proceedings against the company. And this can be done at any time after filing the application and until the application is finally disposed of. Right? So whatever be the case which is pending with the company, the court will put a hold on it. The court will pass the orders to stay all the proceedings against the company, and they will be continued only after the scheme of compromise or arrangement has been complied with, when it has been fulfilled, it has been satisfied. Right? All the procedures have been performed, and then the proceedings can re-continue. And then the power to sanction the scheme that the company or the liquidator or the creditor or member, whosoever has submitted, the court has a discretion. The court will make all the judgment whether or not the scheme is bona fide and workable. Right? It has its certain set parameters that it will check stepwise, and if it feels that the scheme is workable and bona fide, it will allow the company to move ahead with it and give directions to call the meeting, else it will reject the scheme then and there. And we have also seen that once the court has allowed the scheme to be taken forward, like once they have asked the creditors to hold a meeting or the members to hold a meeting, it is the duty of the court to supervise the entire functioning of the scheme. It has to put a check on time to time whether or not it has been performed and it is being conducted in the manner proposed. Right? And if at some point of time the court feels that the scheme is not workable, or the pattern that they are following has come to a block end, where there is a doubt with the feasibility, where it is being very difficult for the company or the creditors to move ahead with the scheme, So the court has the discretion or the power to modify the scheme at this point of time, just in order to make it workable. And at any point of time, if the scheme is still not workable, even after making so many efforts, even after the directions of the court has been complied, still if the scheme turns out to be unworkable, and it is unworkable even after the honest efforts made on the company's end and even the court's end, then that is the time when the court has the power to order winding up. And this will be deemed to be the order of compulsory winding up under section 433 of the Companies Act 1956. Right? So these are the basic power of the court, starting from the point of asking the creditors and the members to hold the meeting, to the sanction of the scheme, to supervision, to order to modification, to order winding up, everything. So the court is the supreme power and who has the entire control over the functioning, over the procedures of compromise and arrangement. And that is what we have seen so far. So now we move ahead. We have understood the procedures of compromise arrangement. We have seen the powers of the court. And now, after compromise and arrangement, we move ahead to the next step, that is amalgamation. So section 394 deals with reconstruction or amalgamation by sale of undertaking. Right? Previously what we have seen is that the company exists, that the company continues its working the way it was, and there was an issue, there was a dispute that had to be resolved by a compromise or an arrangement between the shareholders and the creditors. So it was basically a compromise of settlement of any dispute or the rearrangement of the rights of the shareholders. Now we move on to the next step, where two companies get amalgamated, or one company and form a new company, or two companies gets amalgamated to be named with the first company, that is absorption. Right? And one is the entire sale. So here what we say is reconstruction or amalgamation by sale of undertaking, where the entire undertaking is being sold to some other entity. Right? So let's see how the amalgamation and reconstruction or by sale of undertaking takes place. So to initiate this or to kickstart this, the companies that needs to amalgamate, like there may be A Limited, B Limited, C Limited, and A Limited wants to purchase B and C Limited, for example. Right? So he'll overtake that so B and C will sell their undertaking to A Limited. So first thing is that the company will have to give an application to the court for the amalgamation and reconstruction. And that will be not for the amalgamation and reconstruction. This is an issue. They'll have to give an application same as the application given in section 391 that we have seen for compromise and arrangement. They'll approach the court and they'll say that this is what we intend to do. Because even this is a kind of a settlement where the shareholders are ready to compromise their shares and give it to somebody else, and in return they may get the shares of the new company too. So in our example we have three companies, A Limited, B Limited and C Limited, where they make an application to the court, and along with the application they also send the scheme for the sale that they have drafted, and they'll send it to the court. Right? This application, and along with this application, the content, what will be the content of the application? The application will contain the purpose of the compromise or arrangement. Right? They are selling the undertaking. That also may be a result of a compromise. Right? There may have been certain issues that the company is not able to deal with, and hence as a result of it, to conclude, the company may have to surrender its shares to another entity. So that is overtake by sale. That is amalgamation by sale of the entire undertaking. So that can be an issue, right? So the application that they send will contain the purpose of the compromise or arrangement and the transfer of the undertaking. By transfer of undertaking, we mean that the application will also specify what are they giving over. Like it may be the whole of the company, any part of the undertaking, the properties, the liabilities of any company concerned, whatever it is, right? They need to know what is being undertaken. So the application will contain both of it, the purpose and what is being transferred. Along with it, they'll send the entire scheme. And the content of the scheme will be the transfer of the property, undertaking, liability. We have seen it's along with the application, and the terms of arrangement, the exchange ratio of the shares. These kind of little information will be attached to the scheme. That is the scheme that has been proposed to the court. And then other procedures, like we have seen in the previous section, section 391, the procedure for compromise and arrangement, that is the kind of a procedure that will follow now, right? Then the court, if the court finds that the scheme is viable, it is workable, and it is bona fide, like it has checked the scheme in the previous section, in the similar manner, it will check the scheme over here. It will also check the exchange ratio, whether it is justifiable, whether it is apparent, adequate, right? And then it will again give a direction to hold the meeting, right? And then again, it will also send the notice or the application of the scheme to the central government and take its representation. And again, as the previous section told us, over here also, the court is not bound. They are not forced to abide by the direction or the representation given by the central government. Then the next step to this, that is a stage 2, will be that the court is to be satisfied with the scheme. Again, as per the directions of the Supreme Court, there are specific guidelines given to the courts that they have to follow in order to consider whether or not the scheme is bona fide, right? So the court needs to be satisfied that the scheme is workable also. The first thing is that the court will see is whether the scheme that has been proposed to the court complies with the provision of the Act. Now, since we know this is a kind of an amalgamation, a kind of a compromise, an arrangement, so there are specific sections in the Act which will define them, right? Like in the case of compromise and arrangement, section 391 to 393, 394A needs to be complied with. And if there is a reconstruction or amalgamation, section 394 have to be complied with. So the court will check whether the scheme is compliant with the given sections of the Act. Again, the Act, if we mention in this chapter specifically, is the Companies Act 1956. And then, if they are following if they abide by all the provisions of the Act, then it has to see whether the scheme is bona fide, right? Just because the scheme has come over from the board of director of a company doesn't mean that it is a justifiable and a bona fide scheme. There may be a case that the directors have proposed a scheme, right, for the sale of undertaking or anything that will submerge some negative deeds of the creditors. Maybe they have made a blunder, they have made a mistake, and to camouflage the same, they have put forward a scheme according to which they will sell the company to some other company, and finally they have made their gain and their deeds have been camouflaged. There have been a case in the past, referring to the Pioneer Dyeing House Limited versus Dr. Shankar Vishnu Marathe. Right? In that particular case, the amalgamation of two companies, the scheme for that was rejected by the court. Right? That was because the scheme of amalgamation was constructed to camouflage the deeds of the director, and the implication of the proposed scheme was not clear to the creditors. So that was kind of a misleading that the directors were involved into, and hence the court cancelled the scheme. That is when the scheme was rejected. Right? Next is whether the meeting was held as directed. As we have seen in the previous slide, that the court will give out the directions of how and where, when and where to hold the meeting. So the court will also have to check whether the meeting of the creditors or the shareholders or whomsoever, as per the direction of the court, was complied with. Were they actually undertaking the way the court has directed them to do? And there is another point to keep in mind, that once the statutory liabilities have been complied with, and then if there is somebody who pops up in between and says that the scheme is not bona fide or it is not fair, then the onus to prove is on the person who is opposing the scheme. Right? It has been a case referring the Hindustan General Electric Corporation Limited and also the case of Sussex Bricks Company Limited. Right? Where if somebody opposes a scheme, they will have to prove it. The onus of the burden of proof lies with the person opposing the scheme. Further, the court will also check whether or not the amalgamation is in public interest, whether the shares are appropriately valued. Right? Basically, the court sometimes may skip this situation if the valuation has been done by an external expert. Right? But even in that case, the court will need all the working and all the document and the assumptions that the other external valuer has made in order to come to a concrete value that it has determined, that he has determined, right? And then the court needs to be satisfied that the valuation for the share that has been created is just and reasonable, right? And finally, the court will need to check whether the report from ROC is received. Now, what is the report from ROC? Right? Whenever these kinds of amalgamation takes place, the registrar of company has to send a report to the court whether or not the acts, the deeds of the companies have been conducted in a manner which is prejudicial to the interest of the public or its members, right? So the court cannot sanction the scheme unless and until the ROC gives a categorical report on the issue, right? So long as the report is submitted with the court will not sanction the scheme. Similar has been confirmed in the case referring Srinivas Fertilizers Limited versus Khaitan Chemical and Fertilizers Limited, where the court has rejected the scheme of amalgamation because they had not received the report from ROC that the affairs were not conducted in a manner prejudicial to the members or to the public in general. So after this, the next step is the sanction of the scheme by the court, right? Now, the court, if it is satisfied and it has got all the documents and it feels that the scheme is reasonable and workable, it will sanction the scheme, right? But along with it, it may also focus on the following matters. Now, what are they? Right? Once the scheme is sanctioned, the transferee company will get the right over the assets, properties of the transferor company. Right? Now, the order of the court will be sufficient to vest these properties on the transferee company. They don't have to undergo any other contract that yes, we are overtaking these properties, these elements, these liabilities. Right? No. Once the court has given an order, okay, it's yours, that means it's yours. We will consider it. Right? And this may also be given to them free of charge, being specifically referring to the order of the court. If the court says these will be transferred free of charge, it will be transferred free of charge. But if the court says it will not be transferred free of charge, then the assets cannot be transferred free of charge. But however, these automation effect will not lie on the personal services. All the material thing, the building, land, machineries, the office department, factories, these can be transferred immediately with the effect of the order of the court. But the order of the court will not be binding on personal services, meaning the people who are working in the organization, in the factory or in the office area. Right? The court cannot force them to leave the transferor company because it has been sold and work with the transferee company. No, it's their discretion. If they are not satisfied with the new boss, they can deny. And in this case, they will have to be given the compensation for premature termination of service. They will be entitled to it because they are not leaving the company by their own will. Right? Over here it is premature termination because the company is coming to an end and they are not willing to go to the new employer. Right? And the allotment of the transferee company, allotment by the transferee company of the shares, debentures, whatever policies and whatever other interests have to be allotted, it will be allotted as per the scheme. Right? It has to be mentioned in the scheme. We have seen that the exchange ratio and stuff will be mentioned in the scheme. So accordingly, the shares will be transferred. And also with the effect of the order of the court, the legal proceedings that we have seen that the court has the power to stay the legal proceedings in the suits, they will now continue in the name of the new company, that is the transferee company. All the suits and proceedings which were in the favor of the company also and which were against the company, both of them will continue with the transferee company, which is the new company. And with this, what will happen to the transferor company? The transferor company will be dissolved without any winding up. But that will only be the case where the liquidator, the official liquidator, confirms to the court that the work of the transferor company were not prejudicial to the interest of the members or the public. Right? They were fair enough and the scheme has been abided with and all the transfer has taken place lawfully and so the company stands in a position to be dissolved. Right? There is no purpose of getting into further liquidation because there is nothing left with the company. The company is already sold and transferred everything to the transferee company. Now it's only the name that has to be dissolved, right? And also it will give effect to all the other matters which are supplemental and complementing the scheme, and that has to be undertaken in order to help the scheme to actually be effective, right? Those matters will also be included, and that is all. That is how the scheme is being sanctioned and how it is being worked upon, right? And what happens to the transferee company, what happens to the transferor company. Now finally, filing of the order of the court with ROC. The court that has made the order, it has to be filed with ROC within 30 days. And from where will the 30 days be calculated? It will be calculated from the date. It will be calculated from the date of the order. The date when the court passes an order in its document that okay, the scheme is approved and the transfer will take place. From that date to next 30 days, you have the time period. Within that date, you will have to file the order with the registrar of the company. So with this, we come to the end of the section and also to the end of the lecture today. So until the next class, the next lecture, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you.